everyone, and welcome to the 2021 virtual Gaithersburg Book Festival. I'm Ryan Spiegel, a proud member of the Gaithersburg City Council and your host for this presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you to support this presentation's authors by purchasing their books from our bookseller partner, Politics and Prose, one of America's premier independent bookstores. You'll find purchase links in the presentation description. And given all we've been through over the past year, it's so important to support local jobs and the local economy. I also want to extend a big thank you to our 2021 featured sponsor, the David and Michael Blair Family Foundation, for their generous support. Okay, let's get started. Today's literary presentation features historical novels by two best-selling authors in which women put themselves on the line. The Invisible Woman by Erika Robuck is a gripping historical novel based on the remarkable true story of World War II heroine Virginia Hall and how, in the depths of war, she would defy the odds to help liberate a nation. Erika Robuck is the national best-selling author of Hemingway's Girl, Call Me Zelda, Fallen Beauty, The House of Hawthorne, and Receive Me Falling. She's a contributor to the anthology Grand Central, Post-War Stories of Love and Reunion, and to the Writer's Digest essay collection, Author in Progress. In 2014, Erika was named Annapolis's Author of the Year. The Women of Chateau Lafayette by Stephanie Dray is a sweeping novel about duty and hope, love and courage, and the strength we take from those who came before us. An epic saga based on the true story of the extraordinary castle of Marquis de Lafayette and the remarkable women bound by its legacy. Stephanie Dray is a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today best-selling author of historical women's fiction. Her work has been translated into 8 languages and tops lists for the most anticipated reads of the year. Before becoming an award-winning novelist, Stephanie was a lawyer and a teacher. And moderating today's discussion between these two fantastic authors is Karin Tanabe. Karin is the author of 6 novels, including A Woman of Intelligence, 100 Sons, and The Gilded Years, which is soon to be a major motion picture. A former Politico reporter, Karin has also written for The Washington Post, The Miami Herald, The Chicago Tribune, and Newsday. She's appeared as a celebrity and politics expert on Entertainment Tonight, CNN, and the CBS Early Show. Welcome, Erika, Stephanie, and Karin.
Hi, thank you so much, Ryan. I'm so excited to be here today at the Gaithersburg Book Festival talking to Stephanie and Erika about their books. They're masterpieces, as one of them says. They're somewhat long, amazing masterpieces. I'd love to start by just talking about the spark that created these books, because I'm always so interested in how people discover these characters in history, especially these women who history has sort of forgotten, and how they decide to write books about them and have the bravery to kind of go down that research hole and bring these women to life again. So, Stephanie, let's start with you. I'm guessing this had a bit of like a Hamilton connection situation.
So people who know my work may know that I have written America's First Daughter, along with my very dear friend and co-author, Laura Coy, as well as My Dear Hamilton. And these are about founding mothers. So I was really eager to tell the story of Adrienne Lafayette, our French founding mother. And that was really the genesis of that story. But you'll notice that the book is called The Women of Chateau Lafayette. And that's because along the way, I discovered a memoir by this delightful author named Giselle Feldman, who is a child who was hidden in the castle during the Holocaust and saved from the Nazis. Her memoir is called Saved by the Spirit of Lafayette. And I got to wondering, is there a spirit of Lafayette? and how was it carried forward? And that's when I discovered that it was really women, generation after generation, who carried on the spirit of Lafayette and his amazing wife, Adrienne, in history's darkest hours. And I wanted to bring that story to the page in its fullness and tell the tale of this extraordinary castle in the deepest part of France that served as a beacon of hope in history's darkest hours.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm like already intimidated by having to go down the research well that I'm sure you did, but we'll get to that next. Erika, tell me about how you discovered this story. You've written so much about women in literature. One of my favorite books that you wrote was about Edna St. Vincent Millay. Oh. And you've also done these, the wives of famous writers, Hemingway, Fitzgerald. How did you move away from like the literary world and discover Virginia Hall?
Well, I have to say the writing community helped to steer me a little. I was going down another wife of famous writer wormhole, which I think is a great place to go because women, I like to elevate their stories that have been hidden. I was writing about Bram Stoker's wife, and an editor said to me, she said, could you just write about a woman who's phenomenal in her own right, not because she's a Mrs. or a daughter of or whatever. And I thought that was really awesome feedback. And around that time, I'm not sure how she appeared on my radar, but I came across a Smithsonian article about Virginia Hall. And by the time I was finished reading, I couldn't believe I'd never heard of this woman from my home state of Maryland who did the things that she did under the circumstances she did. And I became completely obsessed with her.
Yeah, she's from Baltimore, right?
Yeah. And just knowing that she's grown up and, her family has gone to the places mine has gone and, the hunting and the fishing and the Chesapeake Bay, it's all been such a part of my upbringing. Of course, that's where all of the, things we have in common end because Virginia Hall was courageous and brave and I hate being hungry or cold or tired, So
Also, you did not shoot yourself in the leg in a hunting accident.
Not yet. No, not yet. And I hope to never, but yes.
I'm sure you are all the things you said you're not, but let's talk about research. When I was reading these books, I was like, these books are great. And I'm so glad I didn't have to write them because the amount of research in them is intimidating. And I know when I write historical fiction, I think like, oh, I'm going to write about this. And then you discover this on the side and this on the side. And you're like, I have to put this in. And I'd love to talk about your research methods and also how you get yourself to stop researching, because I feel like that's a problem with historical fiction. You could just do it forever and then you'll never have a book. So how do you start and how do you stop? Stephanie, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure thing. So I start because I get obsessed with historical characters. And I think most historical fiction authors have the same, I don't want to say it's a gene, but it's a tendency. And by the way, we have a guest visitor over there. My kitty, that is Butterscotch. He is my research assistant. So I start with who I want to write about and their times. And I'm always interested in the rise and fall of republics. So all of my work sort of gels around those subjects. And in this case, I had started with Adrienne Lafayette in the 18th century. She was a French nobleman, a woman who got involved in the French Revolution with her husband Lafayette, and who would go on to leave an Enlightenment legacy. But of course, as I mentioned, then I discovered that the story of the Lafayette legacy is broader, and it keeps coming up generation after generation, including our own, and I wanted to show that. So I needed to know which women were involved in this amazing story. And the next woman that I approached was Beatrice Chandler, who is the woman who in World War I purchased Lafayette Chateau, renovated it, and repurposed it as a refuge for children. She was a starlet, and she was my research rabbit hole. If you want to talk about not knowing when to stop researching, this is one of the few books where I apparently stopped too early. I thought I knew the story of Beatrice Chandler. I thought she was a well-heeled society maven who got involved with philanthropy during World War I and whose troubled marriage somehow survived the war. And that is actually the story I wrote. But then I made a little stop to the New York Historical Society just to tie up a few loose ends and look at her public papers, because I had already reviewed her private papers thanks to her amazing grandson who allowed me to see those private letters. And at the New York Historical Society, I stumbled over a packet of love letters, and they were not from Beatrice's husband. They were from a soldier in the trenches, a French officer. And I realized that I had uncovered a century-old secret love affair. Fun thing to tell the family. And so I thought, okay, well, now I know what the story is. The story is about a difficult war-torn love affair in the midst of the war. We all know this story. So I wrote that story. And just shortly before this book was supposed to be turned in, I got a phone call from Beatrice's grandson telling me that he had, through the research I had sent him from the New York Historical Society, he had discovered that his grandmother was not who she said she was. She had, in fact, been telling tall tales about her identity her entire life. And I don't want to give a spoiler, so I won't say what she was lying about, but she was a more extraordinary heroine than anyone knew. And I had to follow that thread, right? Like now I had, even if it meant getting an extension for the novel and rewriting it, I had to do it to pay honor to the truth that this remarkable woman couldn't tell in her own lifetime. So normally I would say you have to stop when the deadline comes up. That's the end. You're done. But in this case, for the sake of historical truth and feeling like I did honor to the story, I had to keep going. And so I don't recommend this to other authors, but sometimes the story is going to give you its own answer to that question. And the women of Chateau Lafayette gave me mine.
Wow. I love that. And I mean, who asks for writing extensions during COVID? I mean, nobody, right?
I mean, it's unheard of. It's unheard of.
Unheard of.
You had to do that.
And I can't imagine how you would have felt if you discovered that packet of love letters after you'd like turned to the stress, I feel it through the screen. That's amazing. Those French officers, they'll get you every time.
New tagline. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, reading World War II fiction, it actually sort of is true. Those French officers will get you a lot. Erika, let's talk about how you started and how you stopped. I read that you spoke to people in the CIA currently, and I think it's really sometimes more intimidating to write about people who are more modern day because more exists about them. So it's how do you find it all?
Yeah, it's an act of faith. I think writing, as you have pointed out, it really is an act of faith and a process. And you have to trust that it's going, when you're open to it and you're earnest, it's going to lead you where you're supposed to go. So, once you're opened up and then you find your character, you really sort of, I feel like Virginia Hall trying to find a frequency. And I'm trying to listen. And then all of a sudden, one day, not Monday or Tuesday, but maybe Wednesday or maybe Friday, all of a sudden you get the signal crystal clear, and then it just downloads. But, like every other writing day, it's muddled and staticky. And it's the same with research. So, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write about Virginia Hall. Well, one of the first books I came across, one of the other people involved in the resistance said, don't bother reaching out to Virginia. She doesn't want to be found. And the whole time I felt like Virginia Hall was had her arms crossed like this from the beginning, nope, nope, nope. And then, but gradually, as I started to dig deeper and visit the CIA and go to the National Archives and read her records and her reviews, find that obscure biography, at the time, A Woman of No Importance, the most recent biography, which is fabulous, wasn't written. So I had to go dig with what biographies were available. So there was a great The Wolves at the Door, and I was able to use that by Judy Pearson. And then also a lot of French language books. Stephanie and I talked about, sitting on Google Translate, translating 300 pages of French, which we know things get lost in that. It's not a perfect process, but it's helpful. So doing all of that work, I finally felt that Virginia started to trust me. I know that sounds strange, because then more and more would come. And then, the CIA approval came through that I was able to go visit. And then her niece Lorna, who lives in Baltimore, answered the phone and said, please come see me for lunch. And then Lorna brings out this box of family photographs that are nowhere. They're not in any book, but they just kind of put Virginia Hall into color when she's been a very intimidating pencil sketch for a long time. And then just talking to men and women who are in the CIA now, I just feel so like, to everybody, that there are people who do this and that they have this calling and they respond to it. And they operate in the shadows, and it's just a fascinating world. So I felt like I had a real life superhero the whole time. And over the course of the process, she let me in. So I was able to write the book. And then, of course, the writing, Stephanie, as you pointed out, I thought, okay, because Virginia Hall isn't particularly relatable to the average person, speaking 5 languages and scaling the Pyrenees with the Gestapo on her tail as if it's nothing, I need to find a way in. So I paired her with a woman from the present day who was just a little more warm and relatable, a veteran of Iraq. And I started to write this dual protagonist story. After about 150 pages, I realized it wasn't working, that Virginia's story was too big. I couldn't do that. So I put her aside, and I put Virginia with another woman in the SOE who I'd been, having dreams about, and sort of they haunt you, So I put the two of them together, and Virginia, it almost seemed to say as if, this is about me, focus. So I put that woman aside, and I started writing Virginia's first mission to Lyon. When I got to the end of it, and she's got the Gestapo on her tail and the Pyrenees, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is all backstory, because she went back to occupied France. Why? Why did she go back? And so that became the question. And that, 400 pages later, you find page 1 and off you go, so it's just, that's the way it goes. And I guess I wouldn't have it any other way. I think, wouldn't it be nice to write a tidy little book that's all outlined? Yeah. But it's life is messy and writing is messy. But when it comes together, the joy is so profound. It's like worth all the trouble.
Yeah. I think it's really hard in historical fiction to write that clean, perfect book, because you do discover all these things, and then you have a family member who lets you in, and you discover this trove of information, and you just don't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the generosity of both these families to both of you is something that really hit me when I read the books. So I want to talk about the complexity and the bravery of these women. Stephanie, I read something that you wrote, maybe it was in your afterward, where you said like Adrienne was like too perfect, like you wouldn't find, flaws about her. And I was like, oh, well, is that just the way women were represented in history at the time? Like they're never going to paint them as anything but these like saintly figures. And I'd love to know how you made her a more complex person. And Erika, with you, I know that like Virginia Hall really didn't want to become a public figure from what I read. Like she was not giving of her story. And like, how do you turn these real women into like full complex characters that they deserve to be on the page?
Stephanie, do you want to go first?
Sure. With Adrienne, I had the advantage of a little bit of biographical information. Her daughter had written a biography of her, and she had written a little bit of biographical information about herself while trying to document her mother's life. The fact that Adrienne wrote her mother's biography with a toothpick and ink while she herself was in prison, wow, I think indicated an incredible level of guilt for what had happened during the French Revolution. And so you read a little bit between the lines in what someone is not saying and why they're saying it and when they're saying it. With Adrienne, I still think she's kind of perfect. She's a far more forgiving woman than I could be. She's infinitely courageous. This is a woman who really was the damsel in distress who ended up saving her knight. She saved Lafayette's life, and she risked her own life again and again and again during the French Revolution in ways that I can't even imagine being that courageous. But all of her contemporaries describe her as being without jealousy and of this sort of perfect saintly temperament. You see a little bit of less than saintly temperament peek out in some of her letters. She complains to Lafayette at one point when he's sort of nagging her about getting back their property at some point. And she's essentially saying, listen, buddy, I'm doing the best I can. Okay. I'm walking around France on foot. And you can just, sit down, shut up, and wait for me to finish. Now, she said it, of course, infinitely nicer than I just did. But when you see those little teeny peaks of impatience, you know that there's a real flesh and blood person behind that. So you tease those threads out, if you can, in the story. And with Adrienne, I might have even exaggerated them just a little because she probably was a saint. But for the other characters in the novel, Beatrice Chandler, I also had her letters. And she's extremely funny. She was a comedic actress in her day. And that really comes through. And I should mention that she was also an author. And at one point, she wrote that she had submitted a manuscript to her agent and she hadn't heard back from him yet. And so she feared that her prose was so bad that it might have killed him. And I thought, oh, she's our people. We know this lady. We would love having lunch with her. So I was able to sort of bring her to the page. Martha is the third character in The Women of Chateau, Lafayette, and she is the only fictional character. She's a composite character. And I based her on real women at the Chateau who helped the French resistance and may have been involved in hiding and protecting Jewish children. But I did not want Martha to be the same as the other two women in the book who both idolize Lafayette. They think the sun rises and sets by him. So I needed a contrast. And with Martha, I thought, she's not going to care one bit about this. She doesn't care about the castle, the legacy, she just wants out. She wants to get into the world and live her life. And she's sort of caught up in the great events that force her to find her inner courage. And I think that's something that modern day readers might find a little bit more relatable because most of us don't set out to do glorious deeds. So that is a bit of humanity that I wanted to bring to that character. So that's the sort of approach that I bring.
Yeah, no, and there are such different women. I mean, I laughed so hard. Well, I laughed when I read that Adrienne Lafayette was just so chill about her husband's mistress and had the kids call her auntie. I was like, where is Bravo Television coming in to, cast her on their latest reality show? I was like, she's a very modern lady.
Very French, right? It's a different culture.
Française, yeah. No, but I wondered too if she was torturing her husband a little bit, because if you become friends with your husband's mistress, every time you have tea with him, he's off somewhere wondering what you two are talking about. So that was how I thought of that. I like that take. And talking about bravery, I mean, one thing that really stuck out to me, Erika, in your book, was how they told Virginia Hall, several people told Virginia Hall that she had a 6-week life expectancy on her assignment. I can tell you, I'd be like, merci beaucoup. I will be at the cafe around the corner. Best of luck with the war thing happening. So yeah, I'd love to talk about how you made her the complex character that she is in your book, and how you think how'd she get this way? Was she just born this way? How did she get so brave? I mean, I was born in Maryland and I am not about to go to any front line, let me tell you.
No, I'm not even the teeniest bit brave. But when you look back over the course of her life, she was an outdoors woman her whole life. And there's a page from her yearbook that I posted last week, which is just It's incredible. I wish I had it like in my hands right now, but it summarizes her so perfectly. First of all, she is the president of every club, the editor of the literary magazine, the captain of every single sports team. So she is a natural leader. She's someone that forges ahead. And I think what was the word they used for her? Like she's crotchety, but we can't do without her, something like that, which is just the theme throughout her life. And then when she accidentally shoots off her foot, obviously, it is a bad moment, and she's in the hospital in Turkey where she was in foreign service at the time. And the doctor asked her, your leg or your life? And she decides to have it amputated. After that, when she wakes up, she goes through a suicidal period. She wishes she hadn't done that because she thinks her life is over. She's always been the top dog, and now here she is so reduced. She had all the pills in her hand to swallow them to commit suicide, and then she had a vision of her late father or a ghost or something, but he came to her and he said, this is not who you are, and you have a lot more ahead of you. From that moment on, she was resolved. Okay, that's right. That's not who I am. So she slowly comes out of it, starts working to get a prosthetic leg, which at the time is obviously nothing like the lightweight things that our veterans and people have today, but is a very clunky 7.5-pound object, which she affectionately names Cuthbert, so she can yell at it, has a name. So, and then within months, after rehabilitating at her family farm, she's in Venice and she's learning to paddle a gondola. It's who she was. And so after that, she became so determined. And I think all of that really gave her the fortitude for what she needed for the war. She knew she had the talents and the drive and the deep love of France and its people, and put herself at their service. And so, I think all of these things make us who we are. And that's what made her who she is. Now, again, formidable is the word that always comes up, but there's a few things in the documents. So at the end of her war report, which is, 20 pages of enemies, friends, the places she visited, the bridges she blew up, communication lines cut, every little detail. At the end, the person interviewing her in the typewritten interview says, were you decorated in the field? And her answer was no, nor any reason to be, which I could feel her like, no. But you could just get a little bit of her cheekiness. And then when you see her picture of her getting her Distinguished Service Cross from Wild Bill Donovan, she's giving him such a look. You have to Google it. It is in the public domain, but it is such a cute, cheeky look. And so you get to see there is some playfulness behind this formidable woman. And those little glimpses help to make a human person out of a character.
I really, many things that surprised me about her when I was reading your book, but one was that she thought about going into the Foreign Service, but at the time the State Department didn't let anyone with a disability be a Foreign Service officer.
Truly ironic when Roosevelt was president, but.
Right. So. But of course, yeah. And just seeing, it seemed to me like she tried to go this more traditional path, and the doors were just closed to her because she was a woman. She had this problem with her leg, and then it was like, all right, let me just start throwing grenades or going a less traditional path. That sometimes these paths are more open to women than even something like the State Department, which is crazy to me. I'd love to know more about how she stayed so brave, kind of starting over after her network was decimated in Lyon.
Well, I think there were two reasons. And I've talked to a number of combat veterans, and a close friend of mine who's a police officer who suffered a pretty traumatic event in the field and has taught me a lot about post-traumatic stress and what happens because of it. But using sort of what they talked about and what I saw that she did and understanding the psychology behind it, I realized that really there were two things. One, she was motivated to hunt the betrayer. She knew who he was. She didn't listen to her instincts, even though there were all the alarms going off. Headquarters kept saying he's vetted, he's fine. And she accepted it. So she felt guilt. So the survivor guilt, and then all of her people getting carted away, thrown in concentration camps, murdered, that she had to avenge that. She had to bring justice to it however she could. And Virginia was a solitary woman. She wasn't married. She didn't have children. And she had this calling. And so she was determined to do it. But the SOE, the British intelligence service that she worked for, did not want to send her back because she had a price on her head. Her face was on wanted posters. So she went aside from them and she enlisted with the OSS for the United States. Her boss, Wild Bill Donovan, hey, you want to stick your neck out? Go for it. You want to do it in disguise? Let's do it. You know, I always joke, the British called their service the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and the OSS called it the Department of Dirty Tricks. You know, it's such a U.S. British like thing. So she went with the dirty tricks. But yeah, survivor guilt and a healthy dose of revenge. She wanted to get him, and she really was able to find enough information in the field that she helped lead to his capture. So,
wow, that's awesome. I'm also guessing there was no Wild Bill anyone in the British service.
Not that I came across, no.
You have to love America. I'd love to talk about, we're talking about all these real women, and Stephanie, the third character in your book, Marthe, is, a composite fictional character. Let's talk about the balance in historical fiction, like the books you write, of truth and fiction, and how you sort of do you just try to fill in the holes with fiction, or do you think that adding this bigger fictional element makes these historical characters sort of more accessible to modern readers?
So I have not often written purely fictional characters. So in some respects, I'm almost the wrong person to ask. But in this case, I needed this composite character, and I'll explain why. When I started writing the story, I believed I was going to be writing in World War II about a woman named Anne de Lagrange. She was a countess. She was the daughter of the Baron, who was the president of the preventorium at the Chateau. And for people who are listening, a preventorium was how you would treat tuberculosis and pre-tubercular children before the advent of penicillin. So that's what the Chateau had been transformed into. And it was based on a lot of techniques that are sadly familiar to us right now, like keep the kids socially distanced, get them outside and get plenty of fresh air and sunshine. Don't let them breathe on each other. So Lafayette's castle was really well suited for that, being in the mountains. Now, Anne, we know, took over the Chateau at the age of 24 when her father, the Baron, was arrested by the Gestapo. And she was in charge of protecting all of these children at a time when the French resistance was actually hiding weapons under the floorboards of the children's beds in the preventorium. So I want to mention that Anne's sister was married to Henry Hyde, who Erika probably knows about because he was one of Wild Bill's associates in America's version of the CIA at the time. And so I deeply believe that Anne not only knew that the French resistance was hiding guns under the floorboards, but she knew that Jewish children were hidden in the preventorium. I can prove none of this. And on top of not being able to prove it, her father, the Baron, had a lot of ties to the Vichy puppet regime in occupied France. So I faced a choice. Do I lionize someone who might have been a collaborator, had collaborationist instincts, or do I villainize someone who actually was secretly quite heroic? In my heart of hearts, I believe she was a heroine. I really do. But I felt like it would be absolutely irresponsible for me to do either of those things. So I needed to fictionalize a heroine. I knew that the French resistance said there was a French school teacher at the Chateau that helped them, but they don't name her. The little girl I mentioned who was saved by the spirit of Lafayette, Giselle Feldman, talks about administrators in the castle who helped. She does not name them. So I found a photograph of a little girl who was in a classroom of little boys at the castle. The only little girl. She's got blonde braids, and she's looking straight at the camera in challenge. And as soon as I saw that photo, I thought, there you are. That is my character. There's a Marta-shaped hole in this story, and I'm going to fill it with this character. And so that's what I did. So yes, Marta is fictional, but really she is filling that hole. So that is really what I did there. I felt, though, that it really elevated the story. And by the way, I want to say that you say her name so lovely. You make a sound that I cannot. See, I can't do it. I cannot make my throat.
It's like you're spitting. Yeah,
I know. So I just sort of decided to make fun of that a little bit in the book. Very early on, she says, that Americans always butcher her name and say it like Marta.
Marty.
Yeah, so I'm going to continue to butcher her name. I think that in historical women's fiction, when you're doing biographical fiction, which this mostly is, you want to stay as close to the factual truth as you can, while still telling an entertaining story and bringing out the themes that make readers feel something. That's our job. We want you to feel something about this, because there are great biographies out there. I know that it's a great biography of Vera. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say Vera. There's probably one of Vera Atkins as well, of Erika's heroine. And yet I know Erika's book is going to make you feel something intensely for Virginia Hall. And that is what we want to bring to readers. So that's the thing that's always in the back of my mind when I make those choices.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. I when I was going down to Virginia Hall, I saw like that there was the historical book, and then I saw that there was a movie that came out at the end of 2020, and I was like, oh, I should watch that. And I was like, well, no, I read Erika's book, so like, I'm good.
You have to. That's the Leon mission. Yeah.
Yeah, but like, then you kind of get attached to the version that you know.
Exactly.
Let's talk about how you fill in the gaps with someone like Virginia Hall.
Yeah, so for me, I've done both. I've had fictional characters inserted, like in Hemingway's Girl or Fallen Beauty or thing, and then I've done just the characters from history, which I did with The House of Hawthorne. With this novel, because of the nature of the work, there were some people I just couldn't find, but there were also a lot of people I could. So I took the cross-references from about 20 different biographical sources, and whenever a person emerged fully, they got top billing. Whenever there were too many, so in one of the villages, there are, 5 or 6 men with the last name Legrat who did a different function. One kept the books, and one ran the weapons, and one did. It was too much. So one of them got the distinction because he was in a painting with Virginia Hall. There was a group of peasants from the first stop on her mission who met a terrible fate, and she specifically mentioned them in a letter to her mother, but she wouldn't say who they were. And those people I couldn't find, so I went into the town records, into the church records, and I found last names, and I created, those were the people there. So, and then what I do is in the author's note, I explain everything. And the first thing I write is, I'm not a biographer. I'm here to make you feel... I know. Yeah. So, yeah. So after I do that,
World War II, it's so hard because World War II, people expect you to know every aspect of World War II, and you're like, listen, my research really begins and ends here.
Yeah.
So that is.
I tell everybody. I confess everything for what's good and bad, and I let the work kind of lead. Like I said, with the House of Hawthorne, I had Sophia Hawthorne's voice in my ear so deeply from reading so many of her personal writings. I knew I could use her to tell the story, and the cast was so rich. There's Emerson, Thoreau, Alcott, Margaret Fuller. I didn't need to make anybody up. It was all so well documented. So I just kind of let the work guide me each time. But yeah, whatever it calls for.
I love just how comfortable you both are with being able to voice these legends. I feel like some people would be so intimidated, including me, intimidated by that, but you both do it so comfortably and so well. And I think you kind of need that bravery to write books the way you both do.
Well, I'm glad it looks comfortable. It's a very uncomfortable process. It's like dancing. You have to make it look like it's smooth and it doesn't, every bone in your body doesn't hurt, but
Yeah. But was it intimidating at first? I mean, is it something that comes with reps that now you feel like you can do this? I mean, I think a lot of people would be scared to even go there.
Yeah.
It's always intimidating. I don't think it gets any less intimidating for me. In writing America's First Daughter, we had to deal with Jefferson, who people either love or hate. And you have to respect both those feelings. And the same thing, Hamilton's a founding father. You have to tread carefully. And with Lafayette, even though he's not, he's a Frenchman, he's also an American founding father. And so I did want to tread a little bit carefully, although he didn't give me too much difficulty. He's generally the most fun of the founding fathers. But then when you're dealing with someone who's more modern, like Beatrice Chandler, I'm talking with her family. I desperately want to please them, right? I want to write a story that makes them happy, and while also reflecting the truth. And dealing with figures in World War II is even more harrowing because it's such recent history, and it's still very emotional for so many people. So I don't think I ever stopped being scared. What about you, Erika?
No, never. Every book, it's a whole new world that you have to go into. And with Virginia Hall, her niece described her as intimidating and scary smart. Never once likable. And I kept having editors say, but she's not likable. Can we make her more likable? Like, she's not likable. I mean, she is. I love her. I love crotchety, dominant people. But I understand that not everyone does. So it was a challenge. And you can usually figure out if I feel like I can speak in the voice of whether I choose first person or third. And you will notice The Invisible Woman is in third person because I can only, I try to crawl into their skin, but Virginia Hall, I will never be able to fully embody her. So I just have to keep a little bit of distance and watch her through the point of view. Sophia Hawthorne, I feel like I know her inside and out. And, so that's kind of the trick I play. It's, do I go first person or third? So.
Yeah, there's so much truth to that. I totally agree. Well, I want to go to a lightning round. Those of you who saw me moderate last year, I love a lightning round, but I want to talk a little bit about the writing process in COVID. And Stephanie, I want to hear about your trip to France too, because I was reading these books and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm reading arcs. They wrote these during COVID, like they had to have. So let's talk about the process. Like, what changed? Did you just wake up in the morning and start drinking and like just go for it? Or were you like writing at midnight and you couldn't feel sorry for yourselves because you didn't have to like fight through wars? What did you do?
So my trip to the castle took place in 2017. So it was
Okay.
Paris is a wonderful place for researchers to go because most people there speak English. It's very easy to get around. And I got to have the really great experience of staying at the Hotel St. James Albany, which is actually the last remnant of Adrienne Lafayette's childhood home. And that's where she lived with Lafayette. But the really amazing thing about it is that Beatrice Chandler also stayed in that same hotel for the same reason. She wanted to walk in Adrienne's footsteps. So I got to walk in the footsteps of both of my heroines at the same time, and that felt just really great. Then I made the trip up into the mountains, and I did not realize how scary a thing this really was until after we had rented the car, and I thought, oh my God, we're driving up into the mountains in a place where I do not speak the language, and the GPS is super spotty, and there's not like a formal address to the castle. It's just, the castle in Chavignac. So good luck. I remember driving on roads, and they were very slippery, and there were lots of hairpin turns. And we passed an angry donkey at one point who brayed at us as we passed.
Did you put him in the book? Tell me you put him in the book.
There is a donkey that brays. Yeah. So once I get to the top of the mountain, we saw the castle, and I just became very emotional because this is it's a historic place that has seen so much. And I thought, oh, if these stones could speak, what would they say? That's what my book should be about. And I think most people there get very excited when they go in the treasure room because there's lots of Americana there. There's Ben Franklin's signet ring, and there used to be George Washington's dueling pistols. They went missing around the time that they were hidden from the Nazis. I have a theory about where they went, and that's in the book, but it's anybody's guess. But I got very emotional walking into the ballroom, which Lafayette had turned into a philosopher's hall because he did not want it to be overly aristocratic. And the reason I got emotional there is because the little Jewish girl who was saved there, she describes sleeping in that room near the fireplace and feeling safe even though she was being hunted. And there's a video on my website that describes how close she came to being caught. There were Nazis coming to the castle to find Jewish children. So that was an amazing experience. The writing of the book was largely finished before the pandemic struck, but I was still finalizing it. And I remember being very struck by something because I was finishing it at the height of the pandemic when it was the scariest because we didn't know what we were dealing with yet. And so we were under lockdown. And I remember thinking, well, this is not great. But when I look at these women who face situations far darker than what we're facing now, they reached inside themselves and found the courage to meet the moment that they were faced with. And every generation is going to face a challenge. It's going to face a challenge in terms of difficulty of their lives. And also every generation faces a challenge to democracy. It's just how it goes. So I felt very inspired by knowing that these women carried the torch forward generation after generation, and that they're passing the torch on to ours. So I hope readers take that away from the book, and the pandemic gave me that perspective on it.
Wow. I love that. I felt a lot more sorry for myself than you did. I really admire you. Like, life is pain. Erika, what did you do?
Yeah, I have to say, I kind of wish Stephanie had gone second because I feel very much like I need to go out and conquer the world. Where I went to France on the treadmill, like on the Nordic track, there's an iFit app where you can walk anywhere in the world. So from the comfort of my basement, I walked through Lyon, Les Chambers-Lyon, Paris, everywhere. I walked it. I just walked it and not even on Cuthbert. The Pyrenees, walked it, but not cold at all. So no, I have not been to France. I did go to all the places in Maryland where Virginia Hall grew up. She had a family farm up north, closer to Pennsylvania, which the house has been raised. A lot of the land has been developed, but a lot of it hasn't. So I was able to go find, the little Gunpowder Falls where she learned to swim and fish and row. And there's some really pretty hiking paths along the falls there. So I spent time up there. Also, her home in Barnesville, Maryland, I wrote to the people who lived there and said, exactly who I was and how I would like to come over to their house. And then they emailed me and said, come on over. so I went to their house and I got to see where she and her husband, Paul, raised 5 French poodles. The kennels are still there. It looks like a little chateau and a big chateau, actually. It's pretty phenomenal. And where the goats were. And now there are also still baby goats. So I got to play with some goats. And then she's buried in Baltimore. So I was able to go to her grave. She's at the Druid Ridge Cemetery in Pikesville. So I went where I could. I couldn't get everywhere. I will get to France one day. And I know I get emotional even thinking about it. Some of the places where she went. When I go to Les Chambons-sur-Lignon, and I won't say what that village is or did, but I'm like covered in chills at the thought. But
it's amazing. I know what they did. And, Erika, you'll be very close to the castle because the characters in my book were helped by Virginia. So, I mean, not there. She's not named in the book because she came a little bit after.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you'll love to go.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Party at the Castle 2022.
All right. Castle tour. The Hot North. Who's there? Who's not?
Yeah. I think it's so, born in Maryland myself, I think all this Maryland history is so fascinating, and all these amazing people buried in Maryland, like F. Scott Fitzgerald's buried in Maryland, and now learning that Virginia Hall is buried in Maryland. I feel like we should all go pay homage to these great.
Lafayette's been through town quite a few times, you know?
That's awesome. Okay. I'm going to take us to the lightning round, which is a casual, feel free to just like scream out your answers. And we'll start with questions for both of you. And then I have targeted questions for each of you. So I feel like I have to ask this to historical fiction writers. If you could live in any time period other than today, when would it be?
The 20s.
20s. Not now, though. The roaring 20s.
The roaring, not the pandemic. Yes, to be clear.
I would not live in any other time because I enjoy indoor plumbing and penicillin.
Yeah, I also like wanted to say the roaring 20s, and then I'm like, ooh, like, but I just love like telehealth and like these things that I would really miss.
Midnight in Paris, where they call that golden age syndrome, you know, where you think it's better than an earlier time, but really it was not. It was smelly and dirty and had no medicine.
Yeah, especially for women. I think that's the thing. You have to be like, asterisk for women, you know. But the clothes are better. As a person who's really embraced pandemic sweatpants, I could use some roaring 20s in my life. Okay. If you could be any fictional character, who would it be? Or non-fictional, since you write nonfiction, I mean, real people.
I don't know. I might secretly be Beatrice Chandler. I feel like she channels.
Be Beatrice Chandler. I love when she like put on her passport application, see who's who, like the social registry. I was like, this lady's a gas. She's hilarious.
My instinct is always to say Claire from Outlander, but no, that was a horrible life. It's because Jamie, and then you're like, wait a minute. No. Yeah.
I don't think even he is not worth the trade-off.
He's not. I don't think. Yeah.
But if he was a French officer, actually, that's a very good lead into my next question. What has been your quarantine binge watch?
Oh, I've been watching all the historic programs, and I think, I know, I'm going to recommend The Last Kingdom with Uhtred of Bebbanburg. He's super cute. It's on Netflix. It's Bernard Cornwell's series. It's like a Viking sort of story, and I'm not normally a Viking kind of girl, but I make an exception here for Uhtred.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, it's The Crown. The opening credits of that show make me emotional when it's forged from like the hunk of metal into the crown. I can't even take it. Like, I can't take it.
And now I feel like with what's been going on with the royal family, I mean, it's just, yeah.
I feel like I have insight, and I definitely don't, you know.
Yeah. Have you watched like French shows? Are you binging any French shows? Call My Agent, for instance. I highly recommend.
Ooh, no.
I have a series to recommend to both of you, actually, called A French Village. It's subtitled. It is amazing. It's about an occupied French village during World War II. Wow. It goes through every year of the war, and it's so great. And it's going to make you all want to run out and get The Invisible Woman, which you should do anyway. But
really? Ooh. Have you all watched The 100-Foot Journey?
No. Oh, wait, is that the restaurant one?
Yes.
Yes, that was great. That was really
talk
great.
A lot. Anything those will make you want to go to France too.
Yeah, I've been the laziest food person during COVID. I'm supporting small business, so it's fine. Okay, all right. If you were not an author, you would be ... I
am also a teacher, so I would full-time teach. But yeah, I do that on the side.
Ooh, what do you teach?
I've taught everything from early childhood to middle school to high school to faith formation. I'm a teacher.
Wow. That makes such perfect sense, I think, like teacher and historical fiction writer. And,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I have 2 preschoolers, so I stan all teachers. I think teachers have been the heroes of the pandemic, so I'll cry. Stephanie, what would you be?
I would be unemployed. I have no marketable skills.
I don't think this is true. I disagree.
You're a great researcher. You're a great interviewer.
Well, you could hire me. I would help you research for your books. I do a good job. Historic analyst,
Yeah. Yeah. Did you know, like, this was your calling? Did you start really young writing books?
I did. I started when I was a child. I blame my writing career on my grandmother, who was what we affectionately called a junk lady. She liked to go to antique shops and garage sales, and she would take her 4 grandchildren and stuff us in the back of her lime green Ford Fairlane.
Amazing.
She would be arrested if she did this today. On summer, we'd be locked in there, gasping for air. But as the oldest, she would tell me that if any of the kids got out of the car, I would be in trouble. So I started weaving stories like Scheherazade to keep them in the back seat. And that's where I learned to write hooks and cliffhangers. So that's how my writing career began.
That's amazing.
I love that. It's like lost oxygen to your brain. That's great.
Correct.
My nanny, my Irish grandma, she got me into stories. She would pass me books that I had no business reading. So when I was in the
Lady Chatterley's Lover.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she was giving me V.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic. I would take it in my little Catholic school bag and hide it. I got in trouble in language arts class with Mrs. Faust for reading it. But good old Nan.
It was worth it, though. Those are good books.
V.C. Andrews can tell a story. Always incest, but a good story.
Yeah.
It's I think, I'm always so interested to see what like kids are reading these days, because you always remember the books you weren't supposed to read. Like those are always the ones that
the best
come to, but they were the best. Okay. Do you read reviews? Are you do you go on Goodreads and like reply in your mind to what people are saying? Or do you just ignore everything? Do you inner scream?
I do. I read them. I inner scream. I complain to my friends like Erika, and she understands when I say things like, they're just wrong about that. Like you'll get
of course they're wrong.
You get a review where somebody is convinced that you've gotten something wrong. And I'm like, I can't believe they're going to believe Wikipedia over me. I did the research, lady. I did it. I know.
Yeah.
And then I can't say it. I have to just smile and pretend I love it.
Like the author to-dos or whatever on Goodreads, like the first thing is like, do not reply, like never, ever reply. We know, but obviously sometimes you want to.
Yeah, I definitely read them. I definitely screenshot the most hilarious and share them with my author friends, and we say terrible things. And my husband, oh my God, he gets really upset about it. I do. I really don't. I might get upset about a critical review, but for like just everyday stuff, it's not really, once you publish it, it's not yours anymore. You just have to. And I think it's funny because it very often reflects things more about the reviewer, I think, than the book itself. But there are some really, really funny ones if you look at them that way. But my husband gets really upset. He's, I don't want him to pull like an Emily Giffen's husband and get on there and fight with people. But I feel like there was an author who did go fight with people, and then it never ended well. Yeah, you just have to just let him have that,
Yeah, and like whenever I feel really bad, I'll look at like some incredible book, like whatever this book that is everybody loves, and you go and it has like 3.4 stars or something, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Once I saw that Stonehenge got a 1-star rating because they said there weren't enough stones.
No way.
And after seeing that, I felt a lot better. I thought, well, if even Stonehenge is getting 1 stars, then I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes I just want to be like, well, you try it. You do it. And then we'll talk. But yeah, no, I think you have to approach it just being like, I'm a sane lady, and everyone's allowed to have an opinion.
Yes, even though it's not at all how we feel. The funny thing, too, is to look at the things they've also reviewed, which I find is the antidote if you really start getting ramped up. So like a 1-star on one of my books, if you look into the thing that she gave a 5-star to some women's underwear because it didn't ride up. And I think that's great, you know.
I love this. I think that like a bottle of wine and that is going to be something I get up to one of these days. Okay. Advice for aspiring writers. A, do not do it. Do literally any other career. B, do something else first, then become a novelist. C, do it now and repeat until you have a hit.
Do it now and repeat until you have a hit.
Really?
C.
Wow. I don't know. I think I would say B, sort of.
Interesting.
Sometimes I think I was a journalist first, and it like forced me to write a lot.
Ooh, yeah.
Like as a reporter, and like to really not care if your work sucks, which I think is a really important lesson. You know, when people are like, I have writer's block, I'm like, no, you don't have writer's block. You just don't want to write things that are terrible.
Yeah.
But like, I'm okay with writing things that are terrible because you can fix them later on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great.
And then
so I went to law school and I was a lawyer for like 10 minutes. And
what is this lie you tell of no other skills?
Oh, I don't have any other hobbies or interests.
Really,
lawyer.
It was really just 10 minutes, and I don't use that degree like at all. So I think of myself, oh my God, that was like a giant amount of wasted time. I could have written like 3 novels in that time. So I think that's what brings me to this advice of just start now. It's going to take you a long time before you're good. At least it took me a long time before I was good. So if I had that little head start, I think I would have done better.
Yeah, we'd all just be shaking our Pulitzers. Yeah, but I mean, one day you might like find some unsung lady lawyer who you turned into a book, and you never know. Or like, I feel like a lot of these thriller writers were lawyers, like John Grisham and all these people. Like,
and research for law and words. I mean, that wasn't lost time.
And like the patience for like boring research. No offense to all lawyers. But yeah, I think everything helps in a way, you know, and you never know what you pull into books, like the strange facts that you like have in the recesses of your mind. So, well, that's good. I'm glad none of us picked A, especially during a pandemic. Okay. Stephanie, don't lie. You wrote about Eliza Hamilton. How many times did you watch Hamilton? Do you still love the music, or do you hear the Schuyler sisters and want to start drinking?
I would never lie about Hamilton. I have seen the musical twice. I've listened to the musical more times than I can count. I do know that the musical's length allows me to drive to Annapolis from my house and back again and hear, I think, everything but the last song.
Wow.
So I measure my travel distances in terms of Hamilton's. I am a gigantic fan of the musical. And was that your question? How much of a fangirl am I?
Well, it was sort of like, are you sick of it yet? Because
I will never get sick of Hamilton. Never.
Okay. Oh, I love that. I love it. Okay, Erika, you've written about both Hemingway and Fitzgerald and the women in their lives. Pick Hemingway and Fitzgerald. One is a husband and one is a lover.
Oh. With like a gun to my head? Because the answer is neither.
Neither? Okay.
I guess I have to say, against my better judgment, I love Hemingway. I love him.
Ooh, I love the controversial response.
I've read every single letter and book. I understand him fully as a human. And there's obviously a lot of warts, but I get him. I love him. Fitzgerald, I guess a lover, but yeah.
Sorry, F. Scott, and this from a Marylander. Okay.
We definitely have a fishing connection. There's just something about being nasty on a fishing boat that I get. Yeah, I love it.
Get it, girl. See, I love the end of these because this is when it gets real. Okay. So this one, I guess, is for both of you. So Erika, there are a lot of code names in your book, and I want to know what both of you would pick as your code name. And I'm going to say that I put both of your names through a code name generator already, so I will let you know what it is at the end.
Zelda.
Because Virginia Hall's code names were like very basic. I was like, they were just like women's names. But I feel like we could get...
Well, I mean, the Nazis called her Artemis, which, to do with the hunt. So she did a play on that as Diane. So she had a little bit of fun with it. But yeah, no, I would be Zelda. When I go to Starbucks and I order, I always tell them my name is Zelda.
I love how our code names now are Starbucks.
And I'm like, oh, it's me. I'm Zelda.
Yeah, well, my name is Karin. So obviously at Starbucks right now, I have to change it.
You get all kinds of giggles. Yeah.
Okay. Stephanie, what would yours be?
I think I'm going to go with Athena because I went to Greece Athena High School. And so she was our mascot, and she's the goddess of wisdom from whom I would like to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I love that. Okay. In the codename generator, neither of you got those. Let me tell you what you got. Erika, you got Honest Flamingo.
Oh, of course. That's my second choice.
And Stephanie, you got Cold Hurricane.
Oh my God. That is so fantastic. That's going to be my name from now on, Cold Hurricane.
So if you want to use that at Starbucks, you just feel free. Well, this has been like such an utter joy. I would love to leave this with both of you just sort of talking about, like, if readers get one thing from your books, what do you hope that they walk away with?
I hope that they walk away with the idea that we are all walking on the shoulders of people who came before us, and that we have some responsibility to live up to that legacy and to meet the challenges of our time with, if not as much courage and fortitude, at least some courage and fortitude and selflessness.
Yeah. Like Stephanie, I think the courage and selflessness is something that we all badly need in any time. And also, I hope that readers get a sense of perspective, because it was helpful to me during the pandemic to see what bad could actually look like. And I've been very fortunate during this time. But it just always reminded me whenever I started feeling sorry for myself that I would just read a little bit about Virginia Hall and I would feel her sort of glaring at me. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm fine.
Yeah. I was finishing both your books after I got my first shot, and I was like, am I lightheaded? Am I somewhat hot? And then I was like, Karin, it doesn't matter. Like, just carry through. You can read lightheaded. Well, those are great lessons, and certainly during this time. So I can't wait to meet you both in person. I think we should definitely have a post-COVID drink, some French rosé peut-être. Mm-hmm. And thank you so much for talking to us about your incredible books.
Thank you. And you should mention you've got an incredible book coming out soon. What month is it? July?
Thanks for the plug, Erika. Yeah, July, I have a book called A Woman of Intelligence, and there's also some spy situation there domestically in New York. So spy ladies all around.
Love it. Very
Has
good.
a beautiful cover.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. I already told Stephanie and Erika how extra I was about the cover, so I'm glad it turned out. And it's funny. We were talking about the cover, actually. Erika, you mentioned how you were talking to the artist about the direction of the grass.
Yeah, that's great to see about the grass.
I love that. I feel like you do it for you, but you also do it for the women in your novels, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, I'm just saying that Virginia Hall would really like the grass to go.
I know how Virginia would feel about that. I know her.
I mean, at this point, I bet you do. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for watching us today. And I hope that the next one is in person and we can all be there.
All right.
Thank you to all three of you. That was a fascinating discussion. We're honored to have you as part of the 2021 Gaithersburg Book Festival. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for this presentation. We have an amazing lineup of programs for both adults and children throughout the month of May. You don't want to miss it. So please go to Gaithersburgbookfestival.org and look over the schedule so you can plan your festival month. Before you go, we have a special message for you from the amazing author and bookstore owner, Ann Patchett, and her dog, Sparky. Enjoy, everyone.
I'm Ann Patchett here at Parnassus Books with my dog Sparky, and I want to tell you the importance of supporting your local independent bookstore, Politics and Prose. They are a remarkable partner with this book festival. Now, when a book festival is live, it's really easy. You just go to the table and you buy your book and then you go to the event. But when a book festival is virtual, it gets a little trickier because you're home and you might think, well, I'll just buy the book on Amazon. So I'm here to tell you, don't buy the book on Amazon. For one thing, Jeff Bezos has enough money, right? He's trying to colonize the moon or something. He doesn't need anything that you've got. Politics and Prose, on the other hand, they're your local independent bookstore, and you love them, and they bring you so many events. They work harder than any bookstore I know in their community. And if you want them to be there alive and healthy and well when all this is over, you actually need to support them. They are the people that are putting a tax base in your community, okay? So you have teachers and police officers and firefighters, and when you pay a couple dollars more for a book, you're creating jobs in your community. So enjoy your book festival, support Politics and Prose. Remember, Ann Patchett and Sparky think it's the thing to do. Shop local. Thank you.